Mr. Miacca. Tommy Grimes was sometimes good and sometimes bad. Now his mother used to say to him, "Tommy, Tommy, be good and don't go out into the street, or else Mr. Miacca will take you." But one day, when he was bad, he went out into the street, and sure enough, Mr. Miacca did catch him and popped him into a bag and took him off to his house. Mr. Miacca pulled Tommy out of the bag and sat him down and felt his arms and legs.
"You're really tough,"
says he.
"but you're all I've got for supper, and you'll not taste bad boiled. But I forgot the herbs, and it's better you'll taste without herbs."
And he called Mrs. Miacca. Mrs. Miacca came out of another room and said, "What you want, my dear?"
"Here's a little boy for supper, but I forgot the herbs. Mind him while I call for them,"
he replied. "All right, my love," says Mrs. Miacca, and off her husband goes. Then Tommy Grimes said to Mrs. Miacca, "Does Mr. Miacca always have little boys for supper?" "Mostly, my dear," said Mrs. Miacca. "If little boys are bad enough and get in his way." "Don't you have anything else? No pudding?" asked Tommy. "Ah, I loves pudding," says Mrs. Miacca. "But it's not often the likes of me gets pudding." "Why? My mother is making a pudding this very day," said Tommy Grimes, "and I am sure she'd give you some if I ask her. Shall I run and get some?" "Now, that's a thoughtful boy," said Mrs. Miacca. "Only don't be long and be back for supper." So off Tommy pelters, and right glad he was to get off so cheap. For many a long day he was as good could be, and never went out into the street. But he couldn't always be good. One day he went out into the street, and as luck would have it, he hadn't scarcely gone out when Mr. Miacca grabbed him up, popped him in his bag, and took him home. When he got him there, Mr. Miacca dropped him out, and when he saw him, he said,
"Ah, you're the youngster what served me and my missus that shabby trick, leaving us without any supper. Well, you shan't do it again. I'll watch over you myself. Here, get under the sofa, and I'll sit on it and wait for the pot to boil for you."
So poor Tommy Grimes had to creep under the sofa, and Mr. Miacca sat on it, and they waited, but still the pot didn't boil. At last, Mr. Miacca got tired of waiting, and he said,
"Here, I'm not going to wait any longer. Put out your leg, and I'll stop you giving us the slip."
But Tommy put out a leg of the sofa. Mr. Miacca chopped it off and popped it in the pot. Suddenly, he called for his wife, but nobody answered. So he went into the next room to look for Mrs. Miacca. While he was there, Tommy crept out from under the sofa and ran out of the door. So Tommy Grimes ran home, and he never went out into the street again until he was old enough to go alone. The end.